Vamos entonces con el siguiente invitado. Para quienes no lo conocen, él colaboró en diferentes reformas educativas en países como Inglaterra, Canadá, y además ha escrito y colaborado en más de 40 libros centrados en el análisis del cambio y del papel transformador del liderazgo educativo. Para el señor Fullan, para este gran académico, las 3 claves que cualquier gestor educativo debe considerar para tener un impacto mayor en sus logros y sobre todo en el alumnado son: ser un líder que promueve el desarrollo profesional de sus docentes, ser un jugador de equipo a nivel del centro y del distrito del sistema, y ser principalmente un agente de cambio. Vamos a darle la bienvenida entonces a Michael Fullan.
Gracias, Melina, for the great introduction. Aloha a todos. I'm very pleased to join you at the Santiago Compartir Congress with all the school leaders to talk to you about the recent developments in educational change and improvement. We have a group of about a dozen of us on our team. We mix and match on different projects around the world. Our main development is to partner with schools and communities and larger systems sometimes, and to learn together. We have a saying that 80% of our best ideas come from leading practitioners. So every time we team up, whether it's a student, principal, school principal, somebody at the middle level at the region, we're learning all the time because we're co-determining, as you'll see in the nature of the slides that I show to you. So we have the slides that we put together to really situate this work. I hope we will have a lot of opportunity after your Congress to follow up with different subgroups. So let's get started. This is about leadership in a time of disruption, obviously. We have been, for the last 6 months, like most people, figuring out how to handle the COVID-19 disruption and a lot of ideas around it. So I want to talk to you about how this goes through. Here's the outline of the session, what I want to cover in the next half hour. It's about leadership. It's about the role of the school principal or the school director, I think you call them. It's about deep learning. I'll tell you more about that. And it's about nuanced leadership, a new book. We have a new combination. And the other good news is a lot of our books now, including things that support it, are in Spanish because we're working with Spanish groups, but also our publishers are translating in that. So this helps a lot in the communication. Then let me then say how, just as we lead up to this disruption, Microsoft asked us a couple of months ago to do a report with them that they called Education Reimagined. And you see that we've also had that translated into Spanish. So you can see this, you can download it through npdl.global, which is our own website, or the Microsoft YouTube channel. You can see our presentation from there. So we'll be drawing a little bit on this Education Reimagined to set the stage. And this is where I want to talk to you about how we've initially set it up. We said really there are 3 phases. The disruption itself, starting in March or whenever it did for you, with a lot of changes and learning and everybody thrown off. Nobody knew what to do. And then a transition phase. And these are not neat 1, 2, 3, actually. They flow and they overlap a little bit. And then we thought at the time when we started this report that maybe by September 2020, we could be talking about going back to school. And as you know, the people are all over the map, literally getting back to school. They're going into, some are going back, some are going back under different conditions. Ontario, where we're based, has a very complicated plan, and there's a lot of controversy. So I want to say right now that nobody really knows the clear-cut answer. So this fits my conference description, because we're really talking about leading in a culture of change. The culture of change now is all the time, every day. I'll put that in place. I'll give you some guidelines about how to do that. So these 3 phases, these are coming from our report. The next slide is inside our report, and I'm not really expecting you to pick all these up. You'll have these slides. You have the report itself in Spanish, but we outlined guidelines for individuals and for systems as to how they could handle these phases. And you'll see them not only in the report itself, but a lot of spin-offs are we did on Microsoft YouTube channel. Joanne Quinn, our co-director, myself did a presentation that spells these out more. We also have a new work we're doing with groups that we report regularly on our website. So this is the guideline for really, at one time I said, be prepared for permanent ambiguity, because it seems like it's not very clear. And this fits our definition of leadership. Our definition of leadership is someone who learns according to the circumstances. We give a lot of guidelines for that, but this is how it works in this phase. So I want to take these, just give you a frame for this. And these are findings. Some of them are in our books, the book, The Devil in the Details, the Nuance book, and our deep learning books themselves. But this is how we frame it. If you look at the first big circle here, the education has stalled. It is the case, factually, that most schools, most education systems around the world, even the best ones, were stalled in 2019. This is pre-COVID and earlier. So we say, and OECD backs us up, Andreas Schleicher of OECD says there hasn't been much progress for at least a decade. We would say more than that. And then in this period now, we arrive at COVID. You see in this middle part of the slide that the English, the word is pent up. There's pent up ideas for making things better, and people are stepping in, wanting to take advantage of the confusion, really. And they can take advantage and do bad things, that is, bring the system back, what we would call regression, or they can do good things and move forward. So there really is this mixture. And the reason I'm situating this talk with you is to say that we want to maximize the chances that things can go forward. So I call it the battle of the decade. I think the next 10 years are crucial. The next 12 months, the next 24 months are part of this. And it's going to require proactive people, and leaders especially at all levels, to take action when they're not sure about the results, when they really don't know whether we'll go forward. And they have to learn and do and learn and do. And some of the slides that I give you will be in this direction. This is the education stalled. There's a lot of data. We have reference to it. It shows, for example, I'm thinking of the United States, I'm thinking of Australia, England, we could go around the world, that about 80% of the students, by the time they're in year 11 and 12, are not really plugged into learning. Some of them are really alienated, and others are just, they're not really have a sense of purpose. This is all research that's been well documented. We refer to it in our Microsoft report. So we know then that education is stalled before COVID came along. And then another good guideline we've had, developed this in 2011 around policy. We said that there's, the article in English is called "Choosing the Wrong Drivers for Whole System Change." And a driver is a policy. A wrong driver is a policy that doesn't work what it intended to. So you'll see on the left-hand column of the screen that the four right drivers, the ones that really are, we've been using since at least 2003, are capacity building, collaborative work, focus on teaching and learning or pedagogy, and systemness, which is a bit of an odd word, but it's to connote that people that are working at, whether they're a school teacher or somebody at the Ministry of Education, have in mind that they're trying to connect we try to boil it down to three levels of the system: the local school level and community, the minimum or regional level, and then the policy level. So these four things, the wrong drivers, which are still with us, accountability, by that we mean wrong-headed accountability. I'll tell you what right-headed accountability is later. Individualism, which sounds like you should do good things with individuals, teachers, and we do, but individuals will not change organizations. You need groups to do that. Technology, we ourselves embrace technology, you'll see it in our model, but not as a driver, more as an accelerator. And then these ad hoc strategies you can see are really stuck, making us stick. So as we get into the leadership closer, I have now a very good relationship with our Spanish publisher, Murata, based in Spain. And they're publishing all the books now. This one, which is the role of the principal and the three themes or strategies keys, we call them. You'll see on this book. So you now have advantage of this. This book just came out recently. It's at the Congress. You'll be able to get it. So these are the three keys to the principalship. You see on the left, principal as learner, lead learner. And I'm going to explain that in a moment. And then you see at the bottom, a principal as change agent, school leader, director, you call them, helping to change the culture of the school and the relationship of the school to other schools and the network. And then the system actor, I mentioned already, really aware that the whole system needs to change and they have to be aware of their own part plus the bigger picture. Here's a very powerful finding. Vivian Robinson, one of our colleagues in New Zealand, in Auckland, she did major study on the role of the school leader in terms of his or her impact on student learning, student achievement. And she calculated the effect sizes in statistical terms and set as a guideline, as John Hattie does with his visible learning, that an effect size of around 0.40 or better is worth looking at. Below that is pretty weak. And I want you to take a look at these 5 and what the different measures are. You'll see, as you see, there's only one that's powerful, very powerful. But let's look at the 5 of them. The set goals and expectations. Yes, principals, school leaders, and teachers should do that together. But that won't be, 0.42 is kind of a medium strength contribution. And then strategically manage resources. Again, should be done, but it doesn't have huge impact. And the third one, which ensures quality in teaching, this is a surprise in one way until you link it back to our individualistic focus on the individual teacher. Because what it says is when you focus on quality teaching, how do I get the best teachers, etc., that single teacher, no matter how good she or he is, doesn't really have a big impact unless they connect. So the one we pay attention to that really jumps out at you on this is that the principal who participates as a learner with teachers. And this is really so clear now in our work, as we've seen it with our grounded work, that the principal who participates as a learner with teachers in helping the school move forward has the biggest impact by far. And then the safe environment is certainly a very important part of it, especially around COVID. But this whole set of things really pushes us into, this is the lead learner really as the powerful part. So that's what we're going to pursue in more detail. We have done this before, and one of my colleagues, a great sociologist, you will know his name, I'm sure, Andy Hargraves, who also works in Latin America, he and I did a book in 2012 called Professional Capital, and it's very much grounded on practice, and it pulls out the 3 major powerful pieces of this: human capital, which is the quality of the individual; social capital, how good is the group; and decisional capital, how good is the group individually and together at making decisions about how to move forward. This is a powerful resource. This is also just been published recently by Murata, and you should read it. It's got the more comprehensive description. And then another lens we have, or a framework to get at this work, is coherence. We have a book on coherence, and it's by itself, the word jumps out at you, I hope. We boiled it down to 4 big pieces: focusing direction, top left-hand quadrant; creating collaborative cultures; deep learning, which I'll delve into in a little bit; and then getting accountability better situated, better focused. So this is another lens. We have just a few of these. Notice how simple they are. 4 things interacting with each other and causing the change to happen. The most important thing to think about in relation to coherence is to realize that it's a subjective thing. Coherence is not on the paper only. It's in the minds of people. And this definition, I hope, will make that clear to you. Coherence for us is the shared depth of understanding about the nature of the work. And if you stop and think about that, you can't get shared depth from a big speech or a document. You can only get shared depth by interacting with your other teachers, being well led, working on and sharing progress you're having. Sometimes we say the best learning occurs in between workshops, in between meetings, because it's the day-to-day culture. So I ask you to think about 2 things. One is the shared depth, And the second is, it's the culture of interaction you have with other teachers and your school leader, and then networks of schools that makes the big difference. And it very much is this, what I call the subjective. Here's another way of saying it. Alignment is rational, coherence is emotional. And so you can get a lot of policymakers aligning the pieces. It won't help you unless it's inside your mind and it's shared with with other teachers and leaders and doing it. And what sticks with you is emotional. It's when you try something. It's when students react in a certain way. All of the things that are human are the things that cause learning. We now have on our team a neuroscientist. Her name is Dr. Jean Clinton, who's a child psychiatrist and a specialist on neuroscience. And she's enabled us to see very much, and if you can look at this work, you'll see it, that the learning that occurs best for children or adults is learning that has some subjective, interactive, emotional component to stick with you. So you'll see that. Let's move into the coherence framework a little more as an organizer. And I'll be very brief here, but it does give you the full picture. The first quadrant, and I should also say, this is not step 1, 2, 3, 4 around the quadrant. This is simultaneous. It's like the beating heart. 4 chambers, they're pulsating, each of them, and they cross connect. And so the first one to think about is focusing direction. What are your priorities? What are the goals about students? And here's one. I'm going to ask you to do this on your own time, but this is what we do in our workshops. We say, yes, when you focus on the goals of basic goals of education, it's about literacy, it's about mathematics, it's about schools graduating from high school and those things, and we value those. But we say, as we look at the 2020 now, going into 2021, those aren't the only goals that for the future. You'll see our deep learning goals are ones that get closer to students' sense of purpose, their meaning, their contribution to the world and to themselves. So we are seeing a much more fundamental agenda. Yes, it's grounded in literacy and numeracy and graduation from high school, but it also is essentially developed through these deep learning ones. And if you were on your own making a note now, I would say to you, if you stopped and think and said, what are the goals that are really important as I look at the next 12 months or 24 months, which goals would you come up with for students and learning? And do that with your colleagues, and you'll be surprised that they don't just fit neatly in the traditional goals. Second area, culture of collaboration. This is the big one. All kinds of learning, all kinds of focus. I have to say, and I speak for Andy Hargreaves as well, we have been aficionados of collaboration for 40 years now. We like collaboration, we praise it, we analyze it, but we also know this, that collaboration itself is not necessarily a good thing. You can collaborate to do the wrong thing, you can collaborate to do nothing. It's a very specific version of it. And second, you'll see at the same time that we embrace individual values and individual development, not just group development. So this is not an automatic concept. It has certain features, and this is what I want to get into with you. So if we look at now more precisely, we are always seeking precision, I guess I can call it, without with trying to avoid prescription. So precision is what actually works. John Hattie, I'm sure you will know him. He's got published all over the world now with his visible learning, and he calculates his effect sizes. And we, about 10 years ago, began to work with him to say, you've been looking at individual behaviors of teachers and calculating effect sizes, and they're not very, very high, those impacts. But have you looked at the group? And he said he would start to look at, and he has very much more increasingly in the last few years. And he calls it collective efficacy because he's interested in impact. So now it's collaboration, collective efficacy. And what he found, and this is amazing actually, you'll see it on the slide, is that when he measured collective efficacy, and in the next slide I'm going to give you the components that he measured, he found a powerful, super powerful, bigger than any effect sizes on his individual teacher behaviors of 1.57. Remember I said 0.40 was worth looking at? And the other one effect sizes, you'll see it in the second magnitudes, they all range 29 to 65. 65 is good. It's not nearly as good, obviously, as 1.57. So here's what he said defined collective efficacy. And he and his colleagues have been studying this and developing this with teachers now. And they've written 2 or 3 books on it now. And if you look for the word collective efficacy, do that. But what it is it's 4 things, and then all 4 things are interacting. It's the shared belief on the part of the group. Now we're talking teachers in a school, that they actually can produce results. They believe it, no matter how needy the students are, no matter how challenging it is, they believe they can get results. Not just one factor, but all 4 together. Secondly, the primary reason they believe it is they use evidence of impact. How do we know? Are students engaged? Are they learning? And thirdly, now we'll get into our own work, Mar, culture of collaboration to implement, note the phrase, high yield strategies. These are strategies that have a big impact. And so these schools do focus on what works. And then the last one, very compatible with this talk, is that leaders, that is school leaders, directors of schools, participate in frequent specific collaboration. And so this just grounds it all. Think of these 4 things, dynamically interacting with a group over a period of time. We see it in individual schools, but now we're making it happen with groups of schools, networks, which it gets even more powerful, but it has a big impact on student learning. So one last point in developing this, the newest concept that I have at least, is I call it connected autonomy. And this is a very powerful concept and it's a little bit hard to grasp because it's a sophisticated phenomenon. What it means is that you need to have a degree of autonomy or you won't learn, or you'll be imposed upon by others, or you won't be very effective. So you have to have a degree of autonomy, but you also have to be connected to others to learn more, to have more powerful. And so when you say connected autonomy, the best way I can think about it is one day you're by yourself, you're autonomous in your classroom, fine, you're doing this. The next day, so to speak, you're with the group and you're contributing to the group, you're learning from the group. And then another time you're on your own, you're applying good ideas, but then when you get back to the group, you learn more, you contribute more. So this dynamic of individual autonomy and group work is the kind of culture that I'm talking about. Because if you have this dynamic, it means you're good when you're on your own, and it means you're even better when you're working with others. And if you just stay on your own, you don't get better. And if you just stay on the group, you don't learn enough as additional ideas. So think of this concept as a new concept, and you can see how it works. Andy Hargraves, I mentioned already, obviously, and then he and his colleague Michael O'Connor just published a book on collaborative professionalism. And I'm happy to say, actually, it just came out 2 weeks ago from Murata, so it's in Spanish. I'm not going to read the list here, but they said collaborative professionalism is the moving from the left-hand side of features, where you talk about narrow achievement goals, for example, compared to goals with meaning and purpose. So the right-hand side of this column, the right-hand column is the future, the present, the future. They have many examples because they studied all kinds of examples around the world. So let's think then of that movement, and do pick up their book and use it as an example. It's very compatible with our work and vice versa. So let's turn now to the third part of the outline that I had at the beginning about deep learning. We've been working for 6 years now in partnership with thousands of schools in 8 different countries on the new pedagogies for deep learning. I'm only going to give you a brief introduction. We have lots of material on it on our website, npdl.global, but we also have 2 books, and one of them is Deep Learning, and the second one is Dive into Deep Learning. They're getting translated. I'm not sure what stage they're at, but deep learning is why I want to give you the essence of it in 5 minutes. So the big essence is we've shifted from the narrow achievement goals, we include them, to more fundamental competencies. And these 6 C's of collaboration and communication and creativity and character and critical thinking and creativity. So you have on this the 6 C's. Each one of them we have protocols. They have a definition. They really cover the cognitive development of learning, and they cover the social emotional development, and they're very practical. And another way of thinking of this is if students graduate with the 6 C's as a powerful part of their learning, they are better at learning and better at life. And our books show this. We have examples. All of our examples are coming from the doing part. Again, we're based in practice. This model that we have is powerful, and it's fairly compact. It really has only a small number of parts. So I've given you the 6 C's, that's the outcome. Now we have the immediate means of getting there, which we call the 4 pillars. These are basically learning practices. We've got definitions and protocols and ways of examples of what it looks like. But it is the 4 things of powerful pedagogies that involve students. It's students as learners and partnership with parents and other students and other teachers. It is leveraging digital, so we now have technology in the picture. And it is creating learning environments that aren't confined to the classroom. They're bigger than that. And so at the bottom we say precision without prescription, but this is the 6 C's, and these 4 go together. And then the model itself, this is the compact version. I can just give you it covers a lot, but it's succinct, as I said. The middle, deep learning, are the 6 C's, surrounded by the 4 things I just mentioned, which are the supports for learning. And then the conditions, this is the infrastructure, I guess you could say. Conditions at the school level, conditions at the regional level, and policy conditions. And then the whole thing is a matter of investigative collaboration and inquiry. All of this is very practical and has all kinds of case examples. What I'm conveying to you here is what it looks like in practice. We have been, in this model, you can see how it all goes together. But a better way of seeing it is what people are doing. As we get into accountability, you see that accountability is, we said internal accountability is the accountability you have to yourselves, is far more important than the big external accountability. So we know that you're facing external accountability from policy, and we're doing our part to try to switch the emphasis around so that internal accountability inside your school is more powerful day to day than the external accountability, which can be just not very effective at all. So you can read about that and look about it. I want to show you just one example closer to your own countries. We have worked for 6 years now in Uruguay. It's a small country, 3.5 million people. It has 3,500 schools perhaps, but I'm going to show you 2 things. And since the beginning, 6 years ago, they started with, and actually more than that for them for the first part, by getting devices and platforms in place, the basics of the technology. And you can see in this graph how even according to the quintiles, that the poorest, if you just take the 6 to 13 year age, 90% of them by 2017 had devices, personal devices individually, 99% of the others. So this is a massive really movement to have the devices in place. But more important than that, I'm going to say this is a necessary condition, is what they do with the devices. And this takes us back to learning. And the learning that I've just described in the deep learning model is what they've been doing. In other words, they're putting it in practice. It's not an abstract thing for them. And I'm going to show you, they had a celebration about 2 years ago of their first 10 years of where they've gone from devices to learning to big scale learning. And this gives you an idea of the flavor of it. So let's listen into it.
Bienvenidos al Enlace 360.
Realmente impresionante el evento y lo que pinta esta instancia.
Se van a compartir experiencias que giran en torno al marco red.
Y vamos a verlo además de la voz de los docentes y de los estudiantes.
¿Cómo están? Buenísimo.
Buenas tardes para todos y todas.
Vengo a contarles una experiencia que realicé el año pasado.
Esto es parte de un proyecto que nosotros realizamos en la institución.
La tecnología ha sido el acelerador de las nuevas pedagogías.
Viendo que hay muchos profesores acá, quiero invitarlos a que tengan ese espacio distinto en su clase.
Dejar de ser el que tiene el saber a ser uno más del grupo.
Probablemente este sea el evento sobre educación más grande que hemos hecho en Uruguay.
Yo creo que la red global propone una utopía alcanzable. Es por eso que hay 600 centros que están trabajando en esto.
La red es una invitación de hacer las cosas de una manera diferente.
Con este horizonte del centro en las personas y el centro en los actores que cotidianamente desarrollan la educación.
Once teachers see what happens to their students, they won't want to go back because they see the impact.
Me abrió a otras cosas, nos dio la oportunidad de expresarnos también.
Dejar como que una marca, crear conciencia, sobre todo para los más chicos.
Nosotros creemos en ustedes. Ustedes son los agentes del cambio y nos muestran cada día que los cambios son posibles.
Yo creo que el futuro del aprendizaje empieza hoy y ustedes van a ser sus protagonistas. Gracias.
Okay, so that took them 6 years, the last 6 years, to get from few schools. We started with 100 to 600, and you can see that the students and teachers in that forum, the amount of celebration means a lot of people are participating and gaining from it. And we're now working in Latin America to have CIBAL, which is their innovative support system, provide connections to other countries. So we hope to be able to see that develop further. So I show it as an example. A very poor country goes very far in a short period of time, but they have to be committed and they have to be helped and have some ideas. So I want to now turn lastly to the notion of one of the books is called Nuance, which itself is a tricky concept. And the translation is El Matiz. And nuance is leaders who see kind of specific things that are beneath the surface, is this first one talks about. And so in the book, I have 10 examples, case studies of leaders who do this. So always we're practical. Always we're looking at the cutting edge of leadership. And you'll see in that and I'll give you an idea of some of these qualities in the next few slides. But these are leaders who are able to, they're lead learners, or they wouldn't get this far. And they have to be able to learn all the time. And I'm going to give you some of the elements of this. Here's a very powerful one. This is the finding, and it comes from outside our work as well, is that leaders have to be apprentices and experts at the same time. They're experts, they know some good things, and they presumably use them, but they also have to be learners. And maybe apprentice is a good word for that. Maybe they're learning from students and teachers or parents or whatever. So this mixture of lead learner, I'm a learner, but I'm a leaner. I'm a leader. I'm always going back and forth between learning and leading about what I know. It's a dynamic development. So that's one thing. Marshall Gantz is one of the great leaders in social movements. He captured it. We're trying to capture in Nuance the nature of leadership, not only its impact, but the nature of it. And he just says here very clearly, it's helping others achieve a common purpose under conditions of uncertainty. What could be more suited to the current times in COVID and the situation we're in, under conditions of uncertainty. Here's a couple of other findings from the Nuance. One is that leaders who are effective are strong, and what the phrase is deep contextual literacy. That's a bit of a mouthful, but deep contextual literacy means that they understand the context in which they're working. And they really learn deeply about the people and all of the things within that context. Here's another way of expressing it. Every time you move to a new situation or the situation changes like COVID, you become automatically de-skilled. In other words, the leader is de-skilled if they find themselves in a situation that they don't understand the situation. COVID is this writ large. It's really about these conditions, and the kind of leadership we need now, and I think for as long as we can see in the future, are those leaders who realize that new skills are needed, and they develop them, but they develop them with others that they're working with. This is where we get in Nuance. We call it joint determination. Here's one of the leaders from Honeywell who retired. He was very successful. They asked him what his most important learning was as a leader. And this is the way he put it. He says, you have to be right at the end of the meeting, not just at the beginning of the meeting. I hope this translates well, but what it means is if I'm a leader and I'm right at the beginning of the meeting, I'm only right in my own mind. If the whole group is right, what we've done is develop it together. And that's why it's even more effective, because it's a better idea and people are committed to it. And so this joint determination, This another way of describing the focus is to say it's a matter of unity of purpose. This is what makes leadership so difficult, so complex. With a diverse group, and you're a leader, you have to forge a unity of purpose among people who are diverse in a situation that's changing, and you have to make that unity of purpose integrated constantly into the future. And we have examples of that. That's the change we're talking about. My chief researcher in this work actually is born in Mexico City, Santiago Rincon Gallardo. He did his doctorate with Richard Elmore in Harvard and then came to Toronto 5 years ago and joined us as a chief researcher. He has some wonderful work going on. He was part of in Mexico, the tutoring literacy program, which was highly successful 10 years ago, but he's been doing other work now. I just recommend his book, which is now being translated also into Spanish, but it's more about liberating learning, and we'll get a flavor of that. It's very compatible to our work. This is also from Santiago, and you'll see the difference. And this is how I want you to think as leaders. There's a traditional leader who implements government policy. That's not what we're talking about. That's what Santiago calls scientific management, that middle column. And then there's the movement leader, the leader for the future, which is, as you can see, all of this more dynamic, sophisticated kind of leadership. It's about nuanced kind of leadership. And what we are seeing as effective, as necessary, but hard to do, is to develop what's on the right-hand column, which is, you can call it a social movement, or you can call it participatory development, or joint development, as I do in Nuance. But it's those characteristics, and this is where we are leading. And it goes against the traditional way in which organizations, like systems, especially traditional systems, are organized. So we want to cultivate in leadership a nuanced way of thinking. And I will, as I wrap this up, I want to leave you with a couple of ideas. One is, when we talk about the system, this seems like big and complex, but it's not so. We talk usually about 3 levels: local, school, and community, region, which is the middle level, and policy. And there's been a shift, we think, towards, if you want to be more effective, from the model was top down to begin with. In a lot of countries, certainly in Latin America, top down approach to change, and it doesn't really have big impact usually because they don't get it right, or there's too much resistance. To a instead of a top down, you don't have to call it bottom up, but it's like that. It's interaction among the 3 levels: upward and downward and sideways. So our newest work, it's a book called "The Devil is in the Details," which is a bit of a playful title, but that book really talks about those 3 levels, how they can be more dynamic. So I hope this has given you a picture in 35 minutes or so of what we're talking about, what we're doing, game-based in practice. I hope I will have a chance to work with some of you in the future. I also hope that this gives you a really good basic idea of what we're doing. And in the rest of the time, in a few more minutes, I'm going to address, you sent me 10 questions, very good questions, by the way, and asked me to address 5 of those. And I'm just going to pick 5 at random and talk to you about those 5 in the rest of the time I have with you. In the meantime, thanks very much and have a great Congress.
Muchas gracias, Fullan. Y vamos ahora con algunas preguntas que nos van llegando a través de la aplicación Congreso Compartir. We have several questions. So, from Chile, what changes are expected in education, not only after COVID, but in a changing world?
I think both of those parts, that is COVID itself and the changing world, are both applicable. So I want to start with the second one, the changing world. In the last chapter of Nuance, chapter 5, I talk about the context of the world and say that major changes are needed. And remember, I wrote Nuance before COVID, several months before it. And I said this, I said, the world is, the education is stalled and the world is getting worse in 2 respects. Climate is getting worse and worse by the year almost, or less. And then second, and we haven't talked about this, I want to highlight it now, is galloping inequality is the word I would use, galloping. It is extreme inequality where the gap between those that are doing well in society and those aren't doing well is larger and larger and larger. And it is about equity, but you cannot, in societal terms, have a society that gets stronger and stronger distance between high and low performers, whether it's school performance or financial well-being. You can't keep the development going and not have society deteriorate. So I think the main reason for changes and the leadership that will be needed is to realize that the context that we are working in now is not beneficial for humanity and actually cannot last, whether it's 10 years or 50, it's not going to be 100 or 200. It just cannot last. There's too many pressures. It's well analyzed. So this is where we see education as really essential, because for two reasons. One is, if you have the 6 C's, you can cope with greater complexity. If you have the 6 C's, you can start to contribute to the improvement of the world. I know it's a big proposition to say we have to save the world with education, but it is the case that more education is the only thing that I know of that's powerful enough in society to have a good chance of dealing with this world. Remember, that was already in trouble in December 2019, and now is in additional trouble with COVID. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is COVID itself, who knows when we will come out of the end of it. Is it 6 months or is it 5 years? But here's the meaning of it. We take this up in Education Reimagined. It provides the opportunity, because it's so chaotic, it's so disorganized, that you can intervene and cause change. But we see the tension here is that some of those that want to intervene want to take advantage of it for their narrow agendas. Let's say technology agendas, like making more money. And they won't help the social development that I described before. And others want to actually make a difference. I call those the pent-up good ideas and the pent-up bad ideas. So I think the meaning of the realization on this first question is that COVID produces chaos in huge magnitude, really, really comprehensive and deep chaos. So it throws us off balance. It means, above all, we have to be a learner. We have to collaborate. We have to team up. We have to do those things that protect us against systems that are disorganized. And then at the same time, over the next 24 months, we have to carve out the plus examples, the examples that we are talking about in deep learning, of schools and systems and whole countries getting more effective at development. It's a big uphill battle, but it's also, if we don't take it on directly, we are going to suffer in ways that is just hard to measure. The consequences of this will be so negative. So this is a kind of turning point in society, very different than any year that I know of in my last 75 years or so. That this is a very different kind of proposition, much more challenging, much more dangerous, but also much more possible with the right combination of people to get in there and take advantage of the chaos to create something that's really worthwhile.
Great. So from Colombia, how can leaders set a school-level vision and build positive culture in a school?
And a lot of our work is about this, and is very much grounded. I talked about the 3 keys, the lead learner and the collaboration of Vivian Robinson's work. And that the leadership and the vision, I'll just leave COVID a little bit aside for a moment. I'm going to reintroduce it again. But the knowledge we have about how leaders can develop a collaborative culture is very powerful. We have it in coherence, we have it in nuance. And I have a brand new book coming out, I want to say. It's called Leading in a Culture of Change, LCC, I call it. It's being published by Murata, and it will be ready in about 6 months. And it's the second edition of a book I did in 2001 called Leading a Culture of Change. But in it, I updated it, and it's all about how you build the culture inside the school and its relationships to the local environment and beyond that. So we have very specific ideas about how to build culture. That's one way of putting it. The other, which is, I think, encouraging, we have found that those schools and those school systems that are doing best with the COVID impact, that are coping with it best, had strong collaborative cultures to begin with. In other words, if you had a strong collaborative culture and a catastrophe comes along, you manage it better because you're collaborative. If you have an individualistic culture and a catastrophe comes along, you're at the mercy of it because you have no ways of dealing with it. So I think that's very encouraging to know that if you build collaboration, even under these conditions, and there are lots of ways of building it in a small case, 2 or 3 people working together, connections among people, reading the good books that we have now that are very practical about collaboration. And the leader's job is to build a new unity of purpose with the students and the parents and the other elements of the community to really develop something that's powerful. And the better you do that, the more you'll be able to handle change and leverage it. The other final thing I'd say that's come out of COVID is I'm not sure about other the work that you're experienced with, but we have worked a lot with schools in the last 30 years or so. And the role of parents was always a bit ambiguous. Are they in, or are they part of it, or whatever? I can say quite strongly that COVID has elevated the importance of the parents' role, and that some innovations like Escuela Nueva in Colombia already had a very strong relationship between the school and parents and community. They are ahead of what we're doing. But the good thing is that now parents and community are now part of the solution, and which they weren't before, at least in our work. And we see this as a major, powerful addition, and you should take advantage of that. That is, you should say, out of COVID, we're going to have stronger and stronger relationships with the community.
Interesting. Thank you so much. From Uruguay, would it be necessary to redefine the role of the educator during COVID?
The answer is a loud yes. This is, remember, a theme that I've had all through this time with you, is that the system wasn't working very well before COVID. Therefore, along comes COVID. It causes disruption. It means the system even works less well because it's chaotic. But you don't want to go back to the status quo, where a system that wasn't working, you want to go into new things. So this then defines the role of the educator. COVID is the opportunity to redefine the role of the educator. Let's just go down the roles a little bit. I've already said very strongly, the leader, the school director, is very much part of the collaboration, both inside the school and with the community. So major implications for leadership of the school. The teachers have to be more collaborative and more into development, and their pedagogies have to change. Big changes there. The student, we are finding the student as an agent, a change maker is the word I use in English, that they are very interested. We haven't found a student young enough who's not interested in making change. So that we see an elevation of the role of student. Partly it's tied into pedagogy, because if you change the role of student as learner, not just receiving learning from the books, but producing learning with others, with teachers and others, then you have a more of a agency, is one word of saying it, but we have a very much a more active, proactive role on the part of students. So we have the community development, we have the principal development, we have the teachers, we have the students, who knows what else, but the overall point about this is that the multiple roles and the role relationship of the key 4 groups, I think it was 4, students, parents, principals, and those in the community, that those roles have really already have changed because of COVID disrupting everybody. And it's up to us now, I think, over the next 12 months or so, is to pull out of that. What are the roles that are emerging that are positive? We know they'll be collaborative. We know they should focus on deep learning. We know they should have more partners, and we know they should have more innovation, and that this is a time to take advantage of that as soon as we get the basic coping mechanisms in place.
Thank you. From Costa Rica, how to strengthen the relationship between the school and the families during COVID? What do you think?
And this is where I think Latin America has an advantage over Western countries like Canada, the US, or others, is that we have not had a strong tradition of being kind of based into the community in our educational work. You have. And so maybe this was a tradition that was conservative, but it also has the potential to be an innovative mechanism. So I would put it this way. I would say take advantage of your natural habits of being a lot closer between the school and the parents and the community, and build those into innovative habits for future change. And we saw this in Uruguay tremendously when we had, we have a 10-year-old girl saying, I'm supposed to help humanity, so I think I will start with my community. And they just very quickly, the students, 8 years old, 10 years old, whatever, they instantly thought about, once we talked deep learning, how can I learn and how can I help develop? And what they did was they developed an innovation to stop some of the birds eating the vegetables in the garden. They had a robot vibrator that scared away birds. We saw all kinds of small innovations going on because students linked into their communities, into their parents, and did things that none of us thought they were capable of doing or would have been. So this is then, I would say, the opportunity to take advantage of your natural capacity that we don't have. And that capacity is closeness of the school to parents and the community.
Thank you, Michael. And last but not least, from Guatemala, how to deal with equity issues. Not every child has a computer. Not every teacher is ready to teach online. Is this a leadership challenge?
I mean, I've already said that equity permeates all of this. It's an extreme problem in society. It's an extreme problem in schooling. And so if we just take those pieces of equity, it is certainly the case that access to, we just take it kind of in steps. Access to devices is essential. And I've looked at some of the recent reports in rural communities or other areas. You might have only 20% of the population, students that have access to that. So Uruguay made a policy decision. They deliberately said, we're going to supply our students with devices. They weren't very expensive, but they had one-on-one, and they just built that. The second thing that's crucial, and this is up to the area or the region or the country, is you need to develop a good platform to access the information, to share it, to learn from it. Again, Uruguay did devices plus platform. So if you don't have those two, I think those are priorities. It doesn't mean you stop everything else, but it means you have to get those right sooner or later, make them a bigger and bigger priority. And then the third piece of this is the role of the teacher. And I must say that, again, I go back to Uruguay because we know it so well, and because they started with almost nothing, is that the teachers, when we started, sat in the front of the classroom or stood in the front of the classroom, and they just gave knowledge. And the students at the desk copied it down, and they were very traditional. But over time, and I say it's partly because students started to do things. They had robot kits and things like that, and students would say, teacher, can I start to use this? And the teacher really didn't know anything about it, allowed them to use it, and they started to very quickly share in the innovation support system. CEBAL helped them do this, but they rapidly, the students became incredibly innovative, and the teachers, instead of being threatened by that, said, wow, I'm so proud of these students. Look what they've created. And my job as a teacher now, I can see it is changing, and it's actually more exciting. And I'm excited for my students. I'm excited for me now because I can be part of that. So I think you have to use the opportunity. We take it devices, platform, teachers with students taking a chance to do that. And then the fourth piece is change, and this is a harder piece in the, I guess I'll call it the policy hierarchy. What kinds of inspection do you have? What kinds of tests do you have? Is the state investing in it? And I know Mexico is large and complex, but you have state entities that can take action as well as at the national. So be modest, do it in your own kind of corner of what you can control, and hopefully you can link it into the municipality and possibly even to some aspect of the states. But build it from the bottom up. Build it from the equity of devices, the quality platforms, the changing role of the teachers and principals, and the policy infrastructure, at least locally, and look for ways to connect to the national picture. It's a big change, but it's surprising how if you get a lot of examples going on in a lot of different communities, it pushes upward. One of the sayings that comes from the evolutionary biologists that I draw on for my work, one of them, Edward Wilson, said it this way. He said, what I like about evolution is it's relentlessly bottom up. And so I want to think now, as we go post-COVID, that transformation of education needs to be relentlessly bottom up. That is, there has to be a lot of energy. So we are saying, change yourself, change the system. And I think if you get enough bottom-up pressure, it'll be thwarted sometimes, but also you might find some that people at other levels that want to enable it. It's going to be a very complex and dynamic time. It's exciting, it's dangerous, but you shouldn't have a choice to get in there and say, how can I thrive? How can I survive? And the next 3, 4, 5 years is going to be very different than anything we've seen so far. So good luck.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing your ideas, and we are very proud to have you here today. Thank you so much again.